On today's show, it's been quiet on the NBA transaction front, but for how long? We'll tell you which team could be next to make a big trade on today's Locked On NBA.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA Friday. Wes Goldberg here with Adam Mares. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. This summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. We'll talk about Gordon Hayward's decision to retire and what happened to his career, plus where his injury ranks among the most memorable of all time. But first, it's been quiet on the transaction front in the NBA. And I just, to me, wonder, is this the calm before the storm, or is the dust fully settled, right? We have 3 months before the start of the season. Adam, do you think that we're done here, basically, with the offseason, or do you think that we're going to be surprised by something at some point?
I don't know, but there are a couple teams that it feels like something should happen. So that, New Orleans and Utah in particular are the two that I look at. So I don't know, because the logic of trades usually tells us they happen before now. They don't usually happen this late into the season unless it's like a contract holdout, a James Harden situation, something like that. Since there isn't any of those, it feels like there are teams that are more willing to go into the season and make trades maybe earlier than the trade deadline. And that's kind of how I think this will play out.
So last year we got a late trade, but that was the Damian Lillard
That's right.
situation that was taking forever, and that was just one of one, right? I guess the other thing that would be closest to this is the Lauri Markkanen thing, where his whole future is up in the air.
Right.
Is he going to get this new extension or not? He can sign that extension on August 7th. So I think if there was a day where we just sort of get the surprise alert on our phone that says, hey, we got a superstar trade, it's happening, things are moving, it would be on either like August 6th, August 7th. Basically, we've created an artificial deadline now with Markkanen. If he signs that extension, he can't get traded basically until the day of the NBA trade deadline in February. So that's one part. And then, of course, there's other players that have sort of been involved. I know Brandon Ingram has been trade machined basically to every team. I think we've talked about Brandon Ingram before, but he's just such a hard player to trade for because his contract is expiring and he wants a max contract. And in today's CBA, he ain't a max player anymore, right? If you only have room for basically 2 max players, if that's how teams are essentially approaching the salary cap these days, do you really want Brandon Ingram as one of your 2 max guys? I think he's great as maybe a third option on a championship team, but he don't want to be paid like a third option on a championship team, right? He wants to be paid like a 1 or a 2. And I just don't think there's a lot of teams out there that want to go in that direction, So it kind of feels like that's why the Brandon Ingram thing has been in limbo. He's going to be a really interesting case study if he just hits free agency next year and what his negotiation looks like. But in terms of being traded, it feels like if that were going to happen, it would have happened already,
I think the question of his value, like in a vacuum, maybe is even a little off. Because I'd ask you, like, is he better or worse than Jamal Murray as a player? Comparable, probably.
Maybe I would give Jamal Murray the edge. He just does more stuff to me.
Okay. Well, I think they're pretty comparable.
Yeah.
And you look at that and say, well, Denver won a championship, went 16-4 in the playoffs. So like, it's possible to do that with a player that caliber. And we've seen players who have looked something like Brandon Ingram at one team get traded, maybe to a more stable organization, maybe better leadership around. And then they're capable of being what, they were projected to be coming into the draft. So it could be that. The issue for me, though, is that you have a team in New Orleans that knows the answer for them. Like, whatever it is you think of Brandon Ingram in a vacuum or potential or this or that, we know what he is in New Orleans. We know how he fits with that team, both culturally and as a player, and it's just not it. So
they're trying to trade Ingram because he doesn't fit with Zion. But to your point, you could say the same thing about Ingram. Like he doesn't fit with Zion, and and Zion doesn't fit with him. So maybe that's a reason why his value has been depressed a little bit. Like, yeah, Jamal Murray can win a championship as your second best player, but it really helps when you have the best player in the world as your first best player. But I suppose that would be the formula is, okay, well, if we're the team that trades for Brandon Ingram, he's a guy that can roll out of bed and score 26 points per game for us. Do we have that number one guy who can lead the team and do all the things that make a championship team, right? Set the culture, set that foundation, style of play, all of these things. And can Ingram play off of him. Now, I don't know what player that is. I'm sure there's been a million New Orleans Pelicans-based podcasts trying to figure that out, and other teams maybe trying to talk themselves into Brandon Ingram. But whether or not he gets traded next, it feels like a little bit of a long shot. Is there, among the teams that could be next to make a trade, is there a team that you're looking at if it's not the Jazz and it's not the Pelicans?
Well, I look at Golden State, who has Steph Curry still able to win a championship, be the best player. Your window's still open. You still have Draymond Green. What are they doing? They have some young players. They were one of the teams that we kind of expected to enter the Lowry Markkanen sweepstakes. And I kind of suspect that is part of their pattern here as they look and say, hey, he's going to be available. And then, you've got a bunch of other teams that maybe in Milwaukee where things didn't go well last year. This year, you get into a spot where, was that because of all the turmoil? New coach halfway through the year, Lillard's going through personal stuff. He also, is a little sluggish to start out the gate. If the same thing happens this year, then you say, okay, it wasn't that. It's that the roster isn't right. Like right now we get it. So you get into a situation in December where you say, okay, what can we move? How can we try to salvage this? So I think there are teams that once the season starts, you look at it. But if teams that before the season starts, I think Golden State is the big hitter that I would look at.
Their future kind of seems tied to Markkanen, though. So if he signs that extension, maybe they're able to trade for him in February, and maybe they are the next team to make a big trade. Maybe that's when it happens. But if it's not Markkanen, it's sort of like, well, what else? Because they're not interested in Brandon Ingram. I don't know that they were interested in Jared Allen, and he just signed that contract extension. But I mean, other names that have been on like Darius Garland, it doesn't really feel like he's on the move. That's the other team, by the way, like
Cleveland.
Milwaukee, where it says, well, obviously they need to make some sort of roster change, right? Like this doesn't, there's talent here, but it doesn't exactly work. And they said, no, we're good. We're actually just going to sign everybody to a contract extension, hire a new coach, and bank on that. But like with the Bucks point that you just made, if we're 2-3 months into the season and it's like, you know what, this really isn't working. The new coach isn't the only thing that we needed here. We actually do need to make some changes to the roster. Maybe they're a team that moves on from Garland or Evan Mobley or Jared Allen or something like that.
I think that's a good one. I definitely feel like they're another team that, unlike New Orleans, where I feel like we know the answer, Cleveland, I would at least understand, okay, let's run it back and see. Let's give it 3 more months, and at the deadline, we can make a move. I understand them being a little bit more patient there. The last team, though, on my list that I think I wouldn't be surprised if I saw they made a move in August, would be Houston. And Houston's a team that has an enormous amount of a huge stable of young players, but by all accounts, it seems like they want to win now. Coaching wants to win now. They hired veterans, and they have a lot of tradable players, a lot of players that if you are starting a rebuild, you look at that and say, hey, that's enticing. Maybe even in the Markkanen sweepstakes, by the way, Houston. So Houston is the other team that I just would not be surprised if we get a Woj bomb with their name attached.
And they almost need to make a consolidation trade, don't they? They have like a lot of young guys. They might have too many young guys. Like, are we going to figure out which one of these young guys are any good? Because they're all going to be sort of battling for minutes. Maybe
give me the list.
Crop, but
by the way, if you have to like save 3 guys, say these guys are off limits, everybody else is tradable on Houston. Who are you going?
Sengun, Shepherd, and I don't care. Oh, Thompson. I want to keep Thompson. I think now.
Man, over Jabari Smith.
I really like Jabari Smith, but I feel like I could
over Cam Whitmore.
Cam Whitmore probably would have been 4th, but
they have so many good players. I mean, this is the thing, and you are right. And then you got Tari Eason.
Didn't mention Tari Eason. Didn't mention Jalen Green, who is the highest pick out of this entire group. Yeah.
But to your point, you start to cannibalize yourself with your own prospects if you just run into it. So Houston is a team that I almost feel Houston needs to make a trade by the deadline this year. I think it would probably be smart to do it before the season, but by the deadline, I think you have to kind of pick a lane and go with it.
The other team I would say might be the Portland Trailblazers. Not that exciting to talk about, but are they going to find somewhere to dump Jeremy Grant would be the only thing. It seems like they're trying. They're asking for 2 first-round picks. It feels like they probably should settle for 1 first-round pick, and it feels like they should probably just trade him to the Lakers for a bunch of shortish contracts and a first and kind of bet on the Lakers bottoming out in the future. But I want to go back to the Jazz. What if they go the other way with this and they sign Markkanen to the extension? They've been rumored to be shopping Crawford, Sexton, Walker Kessler. Like, those are valuable players that could make a difference to another team. Like, maybe they're the team that says, you know what, let's keep Markkanen and add to it. Like, what if they're the Brandon Ingram team? What if they're like one of these teams that seemed like a seller and all of a sudden emerge as buyers, and that unlocks some of these kind of trades that feel like they've been held up, whether it's Zach LaVine, Brandon Ingram, like whatever it might be, you know?
Well, Utah's an interesting case study just in roster building in general. If you look at from the Donovan Mitchell, Rudy Gobert era, you reset, you get a ton of draft picks, but you also get a player in Markkanen that turns out to be really good, and you hold on to him for a while. And Markkanen, at the time when he first was breaking out, it was a big name. Was he the biggest name on the market? I don't know. A lot of people, I think, liked him. He was certainly up there. But they have waited. Now they've waited through free agency. They've waited till most teams have completed. And now you say, who's the best player who's likely available? It's Lauri Markkanen. So you've almost waited for the market to elevate your own asset. Right. And now they find themselves in a position where he is the name and the guy on top of, oh, by the way, we also have stockpiled all these picks. So teams, when they hit the reset, everybody thinks get rid of everybody and just get bad players. It's like sometimes it's nice to hold on to a Markkanen because you'll find the exact moment when it's like, now we are in the advantage. The seller's market, we could take advantage.
Double down, right? So, yeah, that's kind of been Danny Ainge's MO also, who's running the Jazz. So.
100%.
All right. Gordon Hayward announced his retirement on Thursday, but is his career the biggest what if in modern NBA history? We talk about that next here on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time, or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Thanks again for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. If you're new to us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button. You can also follow us on your favorite podcast app. Gordon Hayward announced on his social media accounts on Thursday that he's retiring from the NBA, and it got me thinking, Adam, about his career and what could have been. I wonder, what it could have looked like had he made a full recovery after the injury in 2017, because I think most people kind of attribute the what if to Hayward's career of, what if he never got hurt? Well, injuries happen, but he was just never the same after that injury, and it kind of got me thinking, who else was able to did anybody ever bounce back from an injury like that who was similar to Gordon Hayward? And the guy I immediately thought of was Paul George, who had that horrific injury in the Olympic tune-ups and basically responded, had an MVP caliber year, was third in MVP voting a few years after that, and obviously just signed a max extension. So he's been just fine. And I started looking into the comparisons of Gordon Hayward and Paul George, and they're eerily really similar. And I just feel like Paul George has had the career that Gordon Hayward probably should have had. You know what I mean? So Hayward was the 9th pick in the 2010 draft. Paul George was the 10th pick in the 2010 draft. They were born 40 days apart. So we'll just start there. Come into the NBA at the same time. They're the same age. Before Gordon Hayward had his injury in 2017, so in the 2016-17 season, he averaged 22, 5, and 4 and was an all-star. Before Paul George's injury in 2014, so in the 2013-14 season, he averaged 22, 7, and 4. So basically, very close averages, both of them all-stars. Paul George, third-team All-NBA. Gordon Hayward barely misses out on third-team All-NBA. Gordon Hayward was 26 years old when he had his injury.
Really?
Paul George was 24.
Okay.
I want to come back to that here in a second.
Yeah.
So Gordon Hayward, before having the injury, this is a guy, again, 22, 5, and 4, all-star player, bursts onto the scene, has that great playoff series performance, and then is a guy who is taking free agent meetings over July 4th weekend. I mean, this guy was the biggest free agent, taking meetings with Utah, with Boston, with Miami, all these things. Since that injury, he never got back to where he was. That's not shy. 14.5 points per game, 5 rebounds, 4 assists since the injury for his career averages. No all-star appearances, and averaged 40 games played a season. Just a different player, fundamentally. Never bounced back. Paul George, after his injury at 24 years old, every year since his injury, his averages 23.6 points per game, 6 rebounds, 4 assists, 7 All-Star appearances, 4 All-NBA appearances. Probably should have been 5 if he made last year's. Third in MVP voting in 2019, averaged 64 games played per season. And then this summer, Gordon Hayward retires, and Paul George signs a 4-year, $212 million contract. Just, to me, I look at that and I'm like, it's such a crazy sort of sliding doors moment for Gordon Hayward and just his career. What that injury in his first game with the Boston Celtics was, it was just the ultimate, to me, before and after injury career that I could think of.
I mean, absolutely. And I remember what was so weird about it. There was a couple things. One, if I recall, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Utah gave him like a 3-year extension on his like first max, not the 5-year typical. And it opened the door because Gordon Hayward is a guy. And I look, coming from Denver, not too different from Salt Lake City. Like, we're used to players not necessarily wanting to be there, right? There's more glamour markets. I thought Gordon Hayward was one of those guys that would be a Utah guy. He just seemed like that's a Utah guy. He'll be there. He's going to be there, John Stockton. When he left and went to Boston, it just felt like such a big deal. And at the time, you're right. We don't really think of him as the superstar, but at that time it was like, hey, his arrow is pointing up. He's already, to your point, 3rd team All-NBA or right on the fringes of it. And his arrow is pointed up. And I remember the excitement around that team in Boston. I was like, hey, this is a team that can actually do something. The fact that it happened on game number 1 on opening night. And if I recall, it was game number 1 of the NBA season. It wasn't like their first game. It was the big, everybody pay attention, Tuesday night, the season begins, and it happened immediately. So to me, a very memorable injury. And he was never the same.
Never the same. So he retires this year, career earnings, $273 million.
He's doing all right.
He'll be fine. But you look at Paul George, who just, you add the $212 million he just made, $520 million. But that's what I'm saying. Like, Paul George is having the career that it feels like Gordon Hayward should have had, you know?
Yeah.
And Paul George also should have had it. I'm not saying like they should have switched places like Freaky Friday style, but like, this is what was possible for him. And he just sort of goes out with a whimper, with Sam Presti calling him a mistake. Like, all the, and just like the free agent nobody talked about. Like, Shams, I guess, tweets it or something, and then he has the social media post. Gordon Hayward does. I forget the order of the news, but it's just like, oh, right. You know?
By the way, he's a guy, I'm kind of surprised he retired, because while he didn't have necessarily a great stint when he went to Oklahoma City, I do think he was a guy that had left more in the tank. Sometimes guys just retire a little bit early, but he's a guy that I thought probably could have played another couple years and would have been one of those guys that was a 7th, 8th man on a title contending team. And a lot of people at that stage go and chase a title. He chose not to do that.
Yeah, I guess that getting traded to the Thunder was the worst thing that could have happened to him, because a team that would have signed him would have been sort of that winning kind of contending, looking for that connecting piece kind of guy. Like, what could he have been a Joe Ingles for a team?
Yep.
You know,
I think he could have, I think.
Me too. I agree with you. I was a little surprised that he retired, but you just see now teams don't want to pay minimum contracts to these veterans with 10 plus years of service, because their veteran minimum is so much higher than a young guy who is going to be healthier and who has some upside. And they're like, okay, well, if Gordon Hayward's not our 8th or 9th guy, then what is he really for us? He's not exactly one of those veterans like a Kevin Love, who sort of, even Taj Gibson is still in the league. Like, one of these guys who have established themselves as sort of this locker room sage kind of guy. Like, I don't think Hayward is necessarily that person. So just a really weird what-if career, right? I don't think him getting, I was looking back on, I don't think him getting hurt necessarily changed the trajectory for the Boston Celtics the way that people think. They still go to the conference finals that year, win 50-plus games that year. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum were in the starting lineup already, so it's not like his injury paved the way for those guys to play more. Maybe it paved the way for them to get more shots up, but they were already in the starting lineup. And then the Jazz, meanwhile, it's the what-if of maybe Gordon Hayward never leaving. I think that's fair. And they had already drafted Donovan Mitchell that year. So they already had sort of their next guy. I remember that being sort of a Peyton Manning to Andrew Luck kind of moment, where Hayward leaves and then they get Donovan Mitchell and you're like, wait, this guy's awesome with the 13th pick? Like, what are the chances? But I don't, like, it's more about like his specific career that I think is the biggest what if. But weirdly, I don't really think that the injury in 2017 impacted like the course of NBA history very much at all, if that makes sense.
No, I mean, you might be right about it. You might be right about it, but he was a good player, and it definitely changed, just an interesting player.
Yep. speaking of Gordon Hayward, is his injury one of the most memorable injuries of all time?
We're
We
going to
talked
cheer you up
about
on a
that.
Friday. We're talking most horrific injuries.
What could be worse? We'll tell you after this. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by FanDuel. I love sports and I love them so much. I never want them to stop, but the playoffs have wound down. We do have the Olympics going on, and FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app, dream up bets, and anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Let's check out FanDuel right now and see what they got going on. Oh, did you know they have an entire section on FanDuel dedicated to Bronny James? Did you see this?
No.
So here's just a couple of things. I'm going to throw them at you. You tell me what you think.
Okay.
Bronny James to score 20-plus points in any game during his rookie season.
What a fun bet.
Plus 900. You got it, right?
You're going to say no. But
I'm going to say no.
But kind of a fun bet.
That's kind of a good sprinkle bet, right? That gives you a reason to watch the Lakers. Not that you needed another reason to watch the Lakers, but Bronny James' first method of first basket made.
Not a fun bet, but
layup plus 210,
okay.
A dunk at plus 900, a 3-pointer at plus 220, a free throw at plus 500, other at plus. I don't even know what other is. That pretty much covered it. Okay. Like a floater, I guess.
Free throw seems like good value. I mean.
I like free throw. Does he get the call? Does he get superstar calls?
He's not going to get a superstar call, but he's going to be in garbage time. It's garbage time. Either a little foul. I don't know.
He takes a lot of threes. He misses a lot of threes, but he takes them too. I kind of like 3-pointer at plus 220. Weirdly.
All right.
So you can, if you want to bet on Bronny James's
I actually like these bets.
Rookie season. Yeah, I'm going to explore these a little bit more when we sign off here. Head over to FanDuel.com. Start making the most of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. The best way to support the show is to subscribe on YouTube and to follow us on your podcast app. Remember, 5-star ratings and reviews are the only ones that count. It's Friday, which means It's time to count down to the weekend with our weekly power ranking.
I'm not a system player. I am a system player.
Go power rankings. Go power rankings.
What are we counting down the weekend to today?
Well,
that's a sentence.
That was a great sentence, Wes. We are counting down in honor of Gordon Hayward retiring the most horrific injuries of the modern NBA. Now, by horrific, I should actually say, I think we actually labeled this most memorable. Most memorable. Which, how horrific they were, how horrifying they were is part of this.
Part of the memory.
Part of the memory, where they happened, where they came. And I'll give you a couple honorable mentions. Obviously, Gordon Hayward's one. I mean, part of this is when it happens on live television and it was an ankle injury, the camera cuts to the close-up of the ankle. And that ankle was a 90-degree ankle. Like, that was a very disgusting ankle. The fact that it happened on opening night, and that it was such a high-profile trade, his very first game with the Celtics, all of those things make it extremely memorable. They were the team of the season coming into it, and immediately it all evaporated. Extremely
I'm shocked
memorable.
That's only an honorable mention.
Yeah.
These must be really horrific and memorable coming up.
To me, they are. And then Klay Thompson's, I would put as well in the playoffs. Just the Warriors looked like they were about to three-peat. His injury happens. Of course, there was another one that might make the list in that same team, that same run. But Klay Thompson's was another.
So one other Klay Thompson injury that I would put my own honorable mention list is the second one that nobody saw when he
trying to come back too soon.
He's playing pickup in Orange County. And it's the day of the draft, and the Warriors have the second pick. And I'm covering the Warriors at the time, and that's probably why this is so memorable to me, because I'm counting down the minutes to the NBA draft starting. The Warriors have the second pick. Is it going to be Anthony Edwards, LaMelo Ball, James Wiseman? Who's going to be
Wiseman?
Turns out it was Wiseman, which was obviously the right pick in hindsight. And then we get this alert that Klay Thompson is going to be out for the season again with an Achilles tear, and you're just like, what? And that basically ruined my entire night as a beat reporter. covering that team. That was a nightmare for me. And you know what? Honestly, more of a nightmare for Klay Thompson. But this is about me.
But you are right. That was memorable, but we didn't see it. So
Right.
you could almost put those two together because the injury really did end up costing, 2 years basically.
Yep.
All right, let's get to the list. Top 5. And I can't believe this is number 5. When I prepped for this and was researching, a lot of sites had this one number 1. Sean Livingston tearing everything. Why is it so
Awful.
memorable? Because it's probably one of the most gruesome of any sport injuries you can see. He's already a wiry guy, like really long limbed. And the way his knee bent completely backwards. And he was a great player. He was a guy with an enormous amount of upside. And to hurt that early in his career and to do it in such a high profile way, it's very memorable to me.
Yeah, this is probably the one where the horrificness and the visual of that injury really sticks with you. It was almost Lawrence Taylor sacking Joe Theismann, right? It's just like, I'll never forget that. That's the Livingston one. And when we were talking before we started recording, that happened in 2007.
Wow.
There are people who just don't even remember that. Remember seeing that.
Don't Google it. Do not take our word on it.
Yep. Just heads up. Yep.
Number
TikToks
4
on that one.
Yeah, number 4, Paul George breaking his leg with Team USA was also extremely memorable because it happened. Correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't this one happen in camp, like in our exhibition game, or I think it was an inter squad scrimmage actually, the blue versus white game. And it was one of those things where I remember at the time we're in the shadow of the Redeem team. There's still momentum for Team USA, but it's like people are starting to say, yeah, but it's an injury risk. These guys are taking on an injury risk. And then he ends up actually snapping his leg. It was also horrific. He was a high-profile player. It was the whole event. They shut down the game. They didn't even finish the game. It was a very memorable moment.
We got like this weird grainy video out of it, which is how we saw it. I remember there was one video that was from behind the opposite basket. Yeah, it was very strange when it happened. But could you argue that might have been the moment that took the wind out of the Team USA sails? Because it wasn't always great, right?
You're right.
Where stars just said, you know what? I just saw what happened to Paul George. I'm not going to do this anymore. It's not worth it. Right. Because it was a little rough for a while.
It was rough for a while. And I think it was also the day everyone really learned the word stanchion. Because I don't think I knew what a stanchion was until that day.
Also a great point. Yes.
And now it's the stanchion. I just thought it was the behind the hoop thing, a little piece there. Number 3, Kevin Durant. Kevin Durant in the finals, grabbing his calf. Obviously swung a title. I think the Warriors probably still would have won that even without Klay. They win it with Kevin Durant. They go on to three-peat. But him going down, grabbing his ankle the way that he did, everybody kind of knowing, oh, this is an Achilles tear. No mystery, and it was extremely memorable.
Very memorable. Again, I'm in the building for that one. I'm there when Bob Myers is crying during the press conference after the game, lamenting the entire situation. Just memorable because it was so obvious what happened at first. And I remember, and I'll never forget, Kevin Durant, the first look across his face wasn't acceptance. It was confusion.
Yeah.
And then the acceptance kind of creaked in. And you're just like, oh, man. And everybody in that moment knew exactly what it was. And, they had to confirm it afterwards. They didn't confirm it right away because how could you? But with an Achilles tear, you pretty much can confirm it.
Because you watch guys grab their leg the exact same way every single time it's an Achilles. He did what I would call the Achilles grab.
The Achilles grab, yep. And you can, and I heard that pop and the whole thing. And
you heard it?
Even though, no, like Kevin Durant was like, I can hear the pop. No, media seats weren't that close. But especially not for a finals game. No, but like I said, the team hadn't even yet confirmed it. They confirmed it the next day because that's just what teams do. But Bob Myers, even before the team confirms it, just breaking down in tears. And I was like, well, like that's as big of a confirmation as any press release is going to be. So, just absolutely crazy, absolutely memorable. And the stakes and everything like that definitely deserves to be on this list.
Number 2, I'm going with Kobe Bryant's Achilles tear, which I know you're going to say Kevin Durant was still in his prime. It was in the finals. It was higher profile, but
it wasn't
Kobe Bryant one was both iconic because he comes back out and shoots the free throws, which is like such a Kobe thing to do, and knocks him down. This whole like, here he goes to the line, knocks him down. And it also just felt like it was over. The Kobe era officially ended there. Probably ended a little bit before, like 2010 or 2011 when they ended up losing the playoffs the first time. But that was probably where that was the moment for me personally where it kind of felt like, man, we're never going to see Kobe again. He did end up coming back, but it was like his Wizards Jordan era.
This was my, like, I just learned the word stanchion moment for Achilles tears. You know, like this was, oh, this is how bad they can be, right?
Yeah.
Because you would hear every player after the Kobe Achilles, every time a player tore his Achilles, it was like, well, look what happened to Kobe. He was never the same again. And it was just sort of this, like, death bell of an injury where it was like, nope, you're done. And now that's what made the Kevin Durant Achilles return so so phenomenal and just so extraordinary, is that he looks the same, which is pretty remarkable. Obviously you credit Kevin Durant, but you also credit advances in modern medicine, etc. It just wasn't the same back then, but you almost credit Kobe. Like, if Kobe doesn't tear his Achilles, do we make those advances in sports medicine? I don't know. I guess it's a what if, but yeah, memorable because it just, even in the moment, it felt like, yeah, it kind of felt like he was done already, and this was just sort of the punctuation on the end of that sentence.
And the last one, or top one, if you will, for me, is Derrick Rose. Derrick Rose ACL tear in the playoffs, 2012, game number 1. And like a lot of these guys, it's just so early in his career. You think that he's going to be this era's Iverson, or that era's Iverson. He's going to be a guy that just is wildly popular, extremely effective, really good, on the upswing. And so much of it was about athleticism. When he tears his ACL in the playoffs, so it's going to cost him an entire full season and then some. You just looked at that one and you go, man, that was a heartbreaker, extremely memorable. The way he goes down, the way he grabs it, everything about it was just one of those ones where you're like, yeah, that's a very memorable moment.
Yeah, I watched the video before we started recording. He actually does like a hop step. He grabs it and does a hop step, like, I just kind of, twisted my ankle a little bit. And then he does this hop step and then falls to the floor. And then you almost see him realize this is not just a twisted ankle. This is really bad. And a huge what if in NBA history.
Enormous.
That Bulls team was awesome. You had Derrick Rose, Jimmy Butler, Luol Deng, Joakim Noah, who was maybe the best defensive center in the league at that point.
Yeah, for sure.
And
really unique player, really good player.
it was like him and Marc Gasol. But yeah, it was like he was probably passing. Gasol was kind of passing the torch to him in that moment. Dwight Howard wasn't really what he used to be at that point. But
And memorable team too. Like sometimes you have a
Really
good but forgettable team. That was a very memorable team.
it was a
Personality.
memorable team. It was the anti Big Three Miami Heat,
Yeah.
right? Where they were like, what is it? Born or grown, not bought, whatever it is.
Built, not bought.
Built, not bought. And they were also the legitimate best competitor to that Heat team. They were the biggest threat. Now, like the Celtics had dismantled at that point. The Pacers were just sort of coming up at that point. with
Ended up
Paul
being a
George.
good challenge, but
Ended up being a good challenge, but never that. Like you even talk to you hear like Dwayne Wade, Chris Bosh, LeBron talk about it now. Not so much LeBron, but like D Wade and Chris Bosh in retirement talk about it. They're like, that was the team. That was the team that gave us the most problems. Tom Thibodeau, coaching them.
Yeah, that's right.
So, and then it all just came crashing down in a single playoff moment. So.
Happy Friday, everybody. There it is.
Big plans this weekend, watching more Team USA. We've got a bunch of, I don't know, I'm trying to end on a high note, but
South Sudan versus Serbia should be a great game.
big time.
You got a couple teams that are now vying to try to make it into that elimination round. Some of the teams will be set, but some of them, they really need a win on Friday and Saturday, so it should be interesting.
Real competition happening. We'll be covering it here on the Locked On NBA feed. But for now, thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Everydayers, make sure you're subscribed on YouTube, Odyssey, and wherever you get your podcasts.